Hi everybody. Today I'd like to talk about a series of solo fantasy game books written by J.H. Brennan, first published in the UK by Armada between 1984 and 1987. I am talking about the Grail Quest series, which I truly believe represents a gold standard in game book design. Even after 30 years, you'd be still hard-pressed to find a more amusing and entertaining collection of light solo fantasy RPG action in comparable page counts. For how fun these books are, it's surprising they aren't longer. Anyway, they are as follows: The Castle of Darkness, The Den of Dragons, The Gateway of Doom, Voyage of Terror, Kingdom of Horror, Realm of Chaos, Tomb of Nightmares, and finally, Legion of the Dead. And just as an aside, the last two are pretty hard to find. They were never published in North America, apparently. I checked online. The first four go for around $10 to $20 on the secondary market, 5 and 6 close to $30, 7 over 40, and the eighth book is $75 to $80. I was shocked to see that. Anyway, even though I haven't covered the fantasy genre yet at all on this channel, I'm a huge fan of it, and I bought these books as a kid when they came out, except for the final two, and I love them. Honestly, I thought they were awesome. Question now is, how do they hold up today? For example, if you were to dedicate a bookshelf in your house to fantasy or sci-fi gaming, would Grail Quest still have a place on it, even now? And I think I know the answer to that question. Before I give you my final thoughts on this matter, let me first describe what these books are all about and how the game system works. There is a general scheme and order of play consistent throughout the series, but for the purposes of this review, I will only reference certain aspects of the first book, Castle of Darkness, to demonstrate what I think are really effective game mechanics and implementations of rules. It's all simple, yet surprisingly flexible and varied, to always fit the artful twists and turns of a quality fantasy narrative. But don't worry, I won't have spoilers in this video, just a few teasers. So let's start by stating the obvious. It's some quality writing, honestly. Brennan wrote these books for teenagers, yes. They don't have complicated language or particularly deep, heavy, abstract concepts, but they do tell great immersive stories. Brennan's sort of, and this is like really hard to describe, but he has an upbeat style that really invites the reader in immediately. So you feel a real sense of adventure beginning in the introduction. And I'll explain this a little further. The setting is the realm of Avalon in the age of chivalry. So we're talking about Camelot, King Arthur, popular in medieval times, the Knights of the Round Table, castles, dragons, druids, working magic. Merlin the Wizard is there. So it's a fairly recognizable and familiar fantasy setting and cast. In the Castle of Darkness, an evil wizard named Ansalam emerges to become an upstart rival to Merlin. He begins as more of a nuisance, but Merlin, through divination, determines that if left unchecked, Ansalam will become more and more dangerous as his magical powers evolve. At the beginning of the book, he is a lower-level magician, but one who breeds monsters and weird creatures in a castle that he owns. And he's also known for generally menacing behavior and intimidation around the realm, laying and devising traps for anybody that tries to meddle in his business. As more people complain about Ansalam, King Arthur is compelled to take action, but his best knights always avoid the issue and put off dealing with the dark magician directly because they are afraid of his rumored magical powers. Merlin is recruited to help out. So this is where you, the reader/player, come into the story. And this is the best part, actually. It's so clever how everything is set up. You discover your book, The Castle of Darkness, itself is a spell written by Merlin. And this is the only part of the book I'll quote briefly because it's actually pretty funny. On page 8, it says, "I'll tell you what the spell does. It takes you away from where you are now, away from your time. Well, it takes most of you, the inside of you. It leaves your body where it is, so if your parents look over, they won't know you're gone. But you will be. Your conscious mind won't be in your time. You'll be transported into the body of a young, innocuous farmhand named Pip," which I'm sure is short for Pipsqueak. And interestingly enough, I didn't clue into this detail at the time. There's never a gender pronoun attached to the main character. So Pip could be imagined as whatever the reader likes. And this was written in the 1980s. So way ahead of its time. Anyway, Merlin wants an assistant apprentice, a cat's paw, really, in his time to act against Ansalam, who will never suspect a local nobody with the brain, cunning, intelligence, and capabilities of somebody from hundreds of years in the future. Even though this setup might sound a little bit silly, this part of the book comes off very well in my opinion. And I mean, just by the way it's all written, so that after you read this explanation, you're like, all right, let's go. Let's start playing. So the rules are explained as follows. And as it turns out, they are in effect something that resembles a very pared down, basic rendition of Dungeons and Dragons. Roll 2d6, add the total number, and multiply by 4 to get life points. Basic combat gets resolved with 2d6 rolls. A 6 result damages an enemy for 1 point in a round, and this is without a plus weapon. 7 result on a 2d6 would do 2 points of damage, etc. So 12 would do 7 points of damage, just in case you're wondering. Hits minus life points, obviously. The player rolls for Pip and then for his enemies in rounds of combat. Big monsters can have more life points than your character. And that's actually not unusual in this game. At 5 life points, a person or thing is incapacitated or unconscious. 0 equals death. Life may be restored by healing potions, and results often vary with these things. There are also more prosaic methods to heal. You can get salves and bandages, and each individual application restores small amounts of life. When these options run out, and they will, you can risk sleep. And then you go to a dream time section of the book where you roll on a table and pretty much anything can happen. You may heal, you may experience a nightmare and lose life. And I think you can even die in your sleep. So you can risk sleep anytime except in between combat rounds. And this is a really cool part of the book also, because the different dreams could be anything, and they are definitely weird, mostly. In addition, there are armor and weapons that you get. Armor subtracts damage, of course. As far as weapons are concerned, you actually start with a fairly powerful blade in this game, known as Excalibur Jr. It looks like a gladius, but it's an enchanted +5 sword that allows you to hit better also, and it has other surprising abilities. This is a gift from Merlin. You also have limited use spells that Merlin gives you, and these are mainly intended to be used only against Anselm. And it's pretty funny too, because one spell involves Merlin drawing a star on the palm of your hand, a la Richard Ramirez, although it's not a pentagram, it's a 6-pointed one. Still, the picture made me laugh anyway, because it shows you like this same kind of star. Anyway, there are rules for avoiding combat with charisma, and this almost never works. But whatever. There's bribery in the game also. It's hard to pull off even with gold pieces, but it's a fun detail. And finally, there are rules that cover experience points that are earned for killing adversaries or solving puzzles. 1 XP per, unless otherwise stated. 20 XP equals a single transferable life point into a subsequent adventure or book, in case you want to play the series as a giant campaign. Okay, so what about the story? How is the game overall? Does it play it well, and what do I like about it? I like everything about these books. The setting and rendering of the environment is top-notch. So the one thing that really impressed me about book 1 is that you can tell Brennan is familiar with actual castle construction and layout. So in other words, this is not a dungeon-like experience for the most part. It's not like a haunted house either. Room after room or chamber after chamber necessarily. Instead, you have castle features to explore, courtyards, battlements, towers, creepy outbuildings and shacks to explore, all sorts of other things I wasn't expecting. Always choices though, through exploration, and there are interesting ones. So I really appreciated that about Castle of Darkness. It feels believable in a fantasy setting. Furthermore, the combat and puzzles and fighting is always varied and modified to suit the situation. For example, we already know about the standard 2d6 combat system, but oftentimes the author will say something like, okay, this creature is non-corporeal, or it doesn't have life or a body in a completely understandable sense, so it can't accumulate damage and die unless you score a single critical hit by taking a special action, which also unfortunately exposes Pip to counterattacks. So that's all clever and sensible, and ultimately compatible with the larger picture. And finally, the overall story arc was a huge plus for me in this book. If you step back and think about it, you realize the plot and everything is more nuanced than your typical modern-day Mary Sue Hollywood construct. Pip is weak to start, and you get beat up and humiliated at the beginning of the story. You have to fight a village idiot, and he's potentially stronger than you. I think he's named like John the Maggot or something like that. Anyway, after some time, you're introduced to and equipped and educated by Merlin to face down Anselm. And things seem to change for the better. You have some spells, formidable weapons, some other tools, and certain knowledge and intel on your ultimate adversary. To the extent that you begin to believe, hey, my character is packing some serious heat here, and I'm going to run this wizard over like a truck without brakes when I see him. But the next thing you know, you encounter something like a wild boar halfway down the creepy forest path that leads to the castle, and when the dust settles, 1/3 of your life is gone. And you didn't gain anything valuable from the encounter either. So yeah, Pip's fate seems tenuous throughout. So overall, it's great. But to be fair, I will mention a few things that I think might prevent the overall experience from being a 10 out of 10. One, there are a few ludicrous situations, like trap devices that result in insta-kills. They are kind of funny, but I could still see those potential situations annoying certain readers or players. First time I replayed this, after like 30 years, I died from one of these coin flip type plot forks. Second, I would say that some key moments in the story aren't augmented with illustrations, and sometimes irrelevant stuff gets better pictures. It's weird. If everything had pictures, the whole package would be even better, obviously. And finally, J.H. Brennan isn't North American, so there's some Euro expressions and language that isn't going to register with young adults unless, I guess, they're Irish background or something. Anyway, it's a very, very minor caveat. I'm just saying occasionally you might read something and be like, say what? Never heard of that expression before. But there you have it. These books would find a spot on my shelf any day, and they are tremendously amusing. I found the very best way to play them is by the book, earnestly, being faithful to the rules, no cheating. Why? Because you get so much more mileage and replayability out of them that way. I'll give you an example. In-game, you might discover a hidden rusty lever in a room somewhere, roll to see if you have the strength to move it. You fail the roll, the mechanical action squeaks and grinds a tiny bit, but nothing happens. It's hopeless. You have to continue to the next area. So 99% of people who read that will cheat and just say they pass a test. You will encounter so many situations like that in these books. I say you don't want to spoil everything these games have to offer in one playthrough. Just roll with it. See what happens according to the rules. It's not like you can't go back and try again later from the start. I just think in the end you will appreciate your overall gaming experience a lot more, and if you win by the book, your sense of accomplishment will be authentic, and you just get more out of each adventure that way. One more thing I'd like to mention about these books, and this is weird, but I remember this being an issue when I was a kid. You could get the first 4 books all at once as a set, which came in a pink case that had monsters on it and everything, but still it was pink. And I thought, why is it pink? It blew my mind as a kid. A boy in the 80s can't have pink on my bookshelf. I didn't understand it, so I went and bought them separately instead. And just, that was the way of thinking back then. It's crazy. By the way, there are no pictures of this box set online that I'm talking about. I checked, so you just have to take my word for it. I swear it's true. J.H. Brennan was way ahead of his time. Anyway, lastly, I don't know how much interest there is today in these books. If I get 100 views off this video, I might take a weekend or two in my spare time and actually port the Castle of Darkness narrative over to basic Dungeons and Dragons rules with maps and everything. I just don't see why it wouldn't work. It could be a really fun one evening retro D&D event for any RPG gaming group. It's that good in my opinion. Or maybe give the other Grail Quests similar treatment as well. They deserve it. I really enjoy them. I hope you do too. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more content coming soon.